The empire was old. It stretched across 17 star systems, and its people had ruled those stars for 10,000 years. They were a peaceful species. Their skin was blue and clear like glass, and their blood ran silver through their veins. They had never known war. They had never needed to fight. When problems came, they talked. They made deals. They used their minds to influence others. Violence was something they read about in old books, something that happened to lesser species far away. Queen sat on the crystal throne and ruled this empire. She was young for a queen, only 200 years old, but she was wise. Her people loved her. They trusted her to keep them safe, to keep the peace that had lasted so long. She believed in that peace with all her heart. But the galaxy was changing. New species were making contact. Old enemies were growing bold. And somewhere in the outer colonies, whispers of rebellion had begun. It was in this time that humans first came to Velar Prime. There were only 12 of them allowed on the Earth. Had made first contact just 5 years ago, and they did not think much of humans. They saw them as primitive creatures, barely evolved, useful only as curiosities. Humans were violent. Humans were loud. Humans solved their problems with their fists and their weapons. They smiled politely at their human visitors and kept them at a distance. Park arrived on Velar Prime as a cultural at the human embassy. That was her official title. In truth, she was a former Marine from the Republic of Korea, 28 years old, trained in combat and security. She had served 2 tours in difficult places on Earth before the Space Corps recruited her for off-world work. She was small, she was quiet. She smiled easily and spoke softly. The who met her thought she was harmless. They were very wrong. When the Queen's Advisory Council decided to hire an alien bodyguard, they did it as a political statement. The Empire was supposed to be open to all species now. Having an alien protect the Queen would show the galaxy that Velar welcomed outsiders. It was meant to be symbolic, nothing more. They chose almost as a joke. She was the smallest human on the planet. She was female, which they associated with gentleness. She had no visible weapons and no threatening appearance. The council members laughed quietly among themselves when they approved her assignment. The Queen's own elite guard, 11 tall warriors trained in defensive protocols, would do the real work. The human would stand in the background and look diverse. Accepted the position without complaint. On her first day, she walked through the palace slowly, looking at everything. She counted the windows. She measured the hallways with her steps. She noted which doors locked from the inside and which locked from the outside. The elite guard watched her with amusement. Commander, their leader, was a massive with shoulders twice as wide as. He stood beside her on that first day and looked down at her with something close to pity. "You understand," he said, "that your role here is ceremonial. You will not be expected to actually protect the Queen. That is our duty." Nodded, "I understand." "Good, stay out of our way, and we will have no problems." She stayed out of their way, but she did not stop watching. In the weeks that followed, learned everything about the palace. She memorized patrol rotations. She discovered which guards took their duties seriously and which ones did not. She found out which guards drank fermented starlight during their shifts and which ones gossiped about the Queen's private business. She learned which doors were weak and which windows could be broken. She also learned about the people who visited the Queen. She watched Lord, the Queen's cousin, and noticed how his eyes moved when he spoke to her. She watched the representatives from the outer colonies and saw the anger hidden behind their polite words. She watched and she listened and she remembered everything. The other guards thought she was strange. They laughed about the human who walked the same routes every day, who stood silently in corners during meetings, who never seemed to rest. They called her the Queen's pet. They made jokes about how she would run away at the first sign of trouble. Heard the jokes, she did not care. One evening, 3 months after her assignment began, Queen called to her private chambers. It was unusual. The Queen rarely spoke to her bodyguards directly. sat by a window that looked out over the crystal gardens below. Her blue skin glowed faintly in the starlight. She was beautiful in a way that was hard for humans to describe, like a sculpture made of light and ice. "You watch everything," the queen said. It was not a question. Stood at attention. "Yes, your majesty." "Why, my guards tell me your role is ceremonial. They tell me you have no real duties here." "They are correct, your majesty." "Then why do you watch so carefully? Why do you walk the palace like you are looking for enemies in every shadow?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because someone has to." The queen turned to look at her. Those silver eyes studied the small human standing before her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You do not trust my guards," said finally. "I do not know your guards, your majesty. I do not know their hearts. I only know what I see." "And what do you see?" Chose her words carefully. "I see guards who have never faced real danger. I see a palace with many weak points. I see visitors who smile at you while their hands shake with anger. I see an empire that believes it is safe because it has always been safe." The queen's expression did not change. "You see threats everywhere." "I see possibilities, your majesty. I hope I am wrong about all of them." Turned back to the window. "My people think humans are primitive because you solve problems with violence. They do not understand why your species is always preparing for war." "We prepare for war," said quietly, "because we know what happens when war comes to those who are not prepared." The queen did not respond. After a moment, she waved her hand in dismissal, bowed and left the chamber. But as she walked back to her post, she felt the queen's eyes following her. Something had changed between them, though she could not say what. That night began sleeping in the corridor outside the queen's chambers. The guards laughed at her. They called her paranoid. They said she was acting like a wild animal guarding its territory. She did not argue with them. She simply stayed at her post. Somewhere in the outer colonies, Lord was making plans. And somewhere in the depths of space, ships carrying death were moving toward Velar Prime. The storm was coming, could feel it in her bones. She would be ready. 6 months passed on Velar Prime. The seasons changed, and the crystal gardens bloomed with flowers that sang in the wind. The palace continued its slow, beautiful routines. Visitors came and went. The queen held audiences and signed treaties and smiled at her subjects. And Park became invisible. The guards had stopped noticing her. She was just part of the palace now, like a piece of furniture that had always been there. She stood in corners during important meetings. She walked the hallways at night when everyone else was sleeping. She ate her meals alone in the kitchen while the servants worked around her. No one paid attention to the small human anymore. That was exactly what she wanted. Because had not stopped watching, and what she saw made her afraid. Lord visited the palace often now. He was the queen's cousin, a powerful noble who commanded the imperial fleet. He was tall and handsome, with a warm smile that made people trust him. The court loved him. The guards respected him. Even the queen seemed to enjoy his company. But noticed things that others did not. She noticed how smile never reached his eyes when he looked at the queen. She noticed how his personal guards were not, but hired soldiers from other species. She noticed how he always found reasons to ask about security arrangements, patrol schedules, and the location of emergency exits. Most importantly, she noticed his secret meetings. Late at night, when the palace was quiet, would slip away to a small room in the eastern wing. Different people would meet him there. Some were nobles from the outer colonies who had spoken against the queen in public. Others were strangers that did not recognize, wearing clothes that hid their faces. She could not hear what they discussed. The room was shielded against listening devices, but she watched who came and went, and she remembered every face. One night, she followed one of the strangers after a meeting. He moved through the palace like he knew it well, avoiding guards and cameras. He went to a storage room in the basement, where he opened a hidden panel in the wall and checked something inside. When he left, checked the panel herself. Inside were weapons, not weapons which were elegant and rarely used. These were weapons designed by a species that specialized in killing. They were assassination tools. Took pictures of everything. Then she went to Commander. The commander listened to her report with growing impatience. When she finished, he laughed. "You think Lord is planning to kill the queen," he said. "The queen's own cousin, one of the most loved nobles in the empire." "I am telling you what I saw," said. "There are weapons hidden in the palace, is meeting with suspicious people. Something is wrong." Shook his head. "This is human paranoia. Your species sees violence everywhere because violence is all you know. Lord is a loyal servant of the empire. He would never harm the queen." "Then explain the weapons." "I do not need to explain anything to you." The commander's voice turned cold. "You are a ceremonial guard, a symbol. You have no authority here and no understanding of politics. If you spread these lies about Lord, you will be removed from your position and sent back to your primitive planet." Kept her face calm. "I am only trying to protect the queen." "The queen does not need protection from her own family. She needs protection from outside threats, and that is our job, not yours." He waved his hand dismissively. "Go back to your corner, human, and stop playing detective." Left without another word, but she did not give up. The next day, she requested a private meeting with the queen. It took a week for the request to be granted, but finally, she stood before in her private chambers again. The queen looked tired. There were shadows under her silver eyes that had not been there before. The troubles in the outer colonies were getting worse. Every day brought new reports of unrest, new demands, new threats. The empire that had been at peace for centuries was starting to crack. Told her everything. The meetings, the weapons, the strange visitors. She held nothing back. When she finished, the queen was silent for a long time. She stood by the window, looking out at the stars. "You are asking me to suspect my own cousin," she said finally. "My blood, my family. I am asking you to protect yourself, your majesty. Has served this empire his entire life. He commands our fleet. He has defended our borders against pirates and raiders. Without him, the outer colonies would have fallen to chaos long ago. That may be true, but it does not mean he is loyal." The queen turned to face her. "Do you have proof? Real proof, not suspicions and shadows?" Hesitated. "No, not yet." "Then I cannot act." His voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Do you understand what would happen if I accused a hero of the empire without proof? The colonies are already restless. The nobles are already questioning my leadership. If I turn on my own family based on the suspicions of a human guard, it would tear this empire apart. And if I am right, if he attacks you, then I will face that when it comes." The queen sat down heavily. "I cannot act on suspicion. My people are not like yours. We do not survive through conflict." Stepped closer. "With respect, your majesty, survival is not about what you prefer. It is about what you are willing to do when preference is no longer an option." The queen looked at her with those silver eyes. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Understanding, perhaps, or fear. "Thank you for your warning," she said quietly. "I will think on what you have said, but I cannot promise to act." Bowed. "Then I will act for you, your majesty, with your permission or without it." She expected anger. Instead, the queen almost smiled. "You are a strange creature, Park. My guards think you are harmless. My advisors think you are a joke, but I am beginning to think they are all very wrong about you." "They are, your majesty." "I know." The queen waved her hand. "Go, do what you think is necessary, but be careful. If you are right about he is more dangerous than you know, and if you are wrong, you will have made a powerful enemy." Bowed again and left. That night she began preparing. She gathered supplies from the human embassy. She hid weapons in places only she knew about. She studied the palace layouts again, planning escape routes and defensive positions. And she started sleeping in the corridor outside the queen's chambers every night, her back against the cold wall, her eyes watching the darkness. The other guards continued to laugh at her. They called her the crazy human. They bet each other how long she would last before she gave up and went home. Ignored them all. She knew what was coming. She could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. 3 weeks later, the storm arrived. The Festival of Ascension was the most important celebration in the Empire. It happened once every 50 years, marking the day when the first queen united the 17 star systems under one rule. For 3 days, the palace opened its doors to thousands of visitors. There was music and dancing and feasts that lasted until dawn. It was also the perfect time for an attack. Had known this for weeks. She had begged Commander to increase security. She had sent reports to the Queen's advisors warning them about the danger. She had done everything she could think of to prepare. No one listened. The festival began on a warm evening in late summer. The palace filled with nobles, merchants, artists, and common citizens who had traveled from across the empire to pay their respects to the Queen. The crystal gardens were lit with floating lights that changed color with the music. The great halls echoed with laughter and conversation. Queen sat on the crystal throne in the main throne room, greeting visitors and accepting their gifts. She wore her ceremonial robes, white and silver, and a crown of living starlight that had been passed down through generations of queens. Stood in the corner of the throne room, watching everything. The elite guard was spread thin tonight. Half of them were posted at the palace gates, checking visitors as they entered. The rest were scattered throughout the building, trying to cover too many areas with too few people. Commander had refused to call in additional forces. He said it would make the Queen look weak. Had counted the guards. She knew exactly how many there were and where each one was posted. It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. The attack began at midnight. It started with the lights going out. Every light in the palace failed at once, plunging thousands of people into complete darkness. For a moment, there was confused silence. Then the screaming began. Moved before anyone else understood what was happening, she pushed through the panicked crowd toward the throne, her eyes adjusting to the darkness faster than the around her. Humans had evolved on a planet with regular night. They were used to darkness. Though were not. She reached the Queen just as the first explosion shook the building. It came from somewhere below in the basement levels. Then another explosion, and another, at different points around the palace. The building trembled like a living thing in pain. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in dim red. Through the chaos, saw shapes moving that did not belong. They were fast and low to the ground with too many limbs. They were not the assassin species she had read about in her security briefings. Insect-like creatures bred for one purpose, killing. They could see in complete darkness. They could climb walls and ceilings. Their claws could cut through armor. Lord had not just planned a coup. He had brought monsters. The elite guard tried to respond. Watched 3 of them charge toward a group of near the main doors. They moved like shadows, faster than anything that size should move. The guards were dead in seconds, their silver blood spraying across the crystal floor. Commander's voice came through the communication system, somehow still working despite the chaos. His voice was shaking. All units fall back to defensive positions. Repeat, fall back immediately. Seal all doors and await reinforcements. Grab the Queen's arm. We need to move now. But before they could run, more appeared at the throne room entrances. They were cutting off escape routes, trapping everyone inside. The crowd pressed toward the center of the room, thousands of terrified people crushing against each other. The elite guard in the throne room, 11 warriors who had sworn to protect their queen, looked at each other, could see the fear in their faces. They had trained for decades, but they had never faced anything like this. They had never seen real violence. They had never smelled death. Commander's voice came again. "Throne room guard, report." One of the guards answered, his voice breaking. "Commander, we are surrounded. There are too many. We cannot hold this position." "Then follow protocol. Fall back to the secondary defensive point. Reinforcements are on the way." "But the Queen." "The throne room doors are reinforced. Seal them and contain the threat inside. We will retake the room once reinforcements arrive." Understood what he was saying. He was telling them to leave, to abandon the Queen and save themselves. "You cannot do this," she said, stepping toward the nearest guard. "You swore to protect her." The guard looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Commander's orders. We have to follow protocol." "Protocol is going to get her killed." But the guards were already moving toward the exits. One by one, they slipped through the doors, which sealed shut behind them with a heavy mechanical sound. The locks engaged. The outside began to pound on the doors, but they held. For now, in less than a minute, the throne room went from having 11 defenders to having none. Except for... She stood alone before the crystal throne as the last door sealed. Around her, hundreds of terrified huddled together, too afraid to run. The assassins circled the room, their clicking sounds filling the air. They were not attacking yet. They were waiting. Looking for the Queen. Had fallen when the explosion started. Now she pulled herself up from behind the throne, her ceremonial robes torn, her crown of starlight flickering weakly. She looked at the sealed doors, then at... "They left," she whispered. Her voice was hollow with shock. "My guards left me." "Yes, Your Majesty. They just left." Did not have time for the Queen's shock. She was counting the 17 that she could see, probably more hiding in the shadows along the walls and ceiling. "You should go with them," said. "You have no obligation to die here. You are not even." Reached into her jacket and pulled out a pistol. It was a human weapon, a projectile gun that fired metal bullets at high speed. It was completely illegal on Velar Prime. She had smuggled it in her personal belongings when she first arrived. She also had 2 combat knives hidden in her boots, a collapsible baton in her sleeve, and a small explosive device in her pocket. She had been carrying them every day for months, waiting for this moment. "What are you doing?" the Queen asked. Pulled out the knives and the baton, arranging her weapons where she could reach them quickly. Then she turned to face the assassins that were starting to move toward the throne. "My name is Park," she said quietly. "I am a Marine from the Republic of Korea on Earth. I was assigned to protect you, and that is what I am going to do. You cannot fight them all. You are one human, they are." "I know what they are," raised her pistol and aimed at the closest. "I also know what I am." The Queen stared at her. "What are you?" Smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I am the thing that monsters should be afraid of." The first leaped toward the throne, its claws extended, fired twice. The bullets punched through its carapace and it fell dead at her feet. Then the rest of them attacked, and the throne room became a battlefield. They came at from all directions. She had trained for this, not for fighting alien assassins, but for being outnumbered, surrounded, and outmatched. The Korean Marines had a saying, "When you cannot win, make them pay for every inch." She intended to make the pay in blood. Her first priority was the Queen, grabbed and shoved her behind the massive crystal throne. It was not good cover, but it was something. "Stay down," she ordered. "Do not move for any reason." Then she turned to face the monsters. They were fast, faster than anything had ever fought. They moved like water, flowing across the floor and walls in ways that should have been impossible. Their bodies were covered in hard black shell, and their claws were long and sharp as surgical blades. But they had a weakness. They were used to easy kills. They were used to victims who froze in fear or tried to run. They were not used to prey that fought back. shot the first 3 as they charged. Her bullets were designed to pierce armor and they punched through carapace like paper. Silver blood sprayed across the crystal floor. The other hesitated, surprised. That hesitation cost them. She shot 2 more before they could react. Then her magazine was empty. She did not have time to reload. A launched itself at her from the left, claws reaching for her throat. She dropped to one knee, letting it sail over her head, and slammed her knife into its belly as it passed. The blade caught between its shell plates and tore a long gash. The creature screamed and crashed into a pillar. Another came from behind. She spun, too slow, and its claw raked across her ribs. Pain exploded through her side, but she did not stop. She grabbed the creature's arm with her left hand and drove her knife into its eye with her right. It collapsed, taking her knife with it. 8 down, 9 more to go, maybe more hiding somewhere. Pulled her second knife from her boot. Her side was burning and she could feel blood soaking through her shirt. She pushed the pain aside. Pain was just information. It told her she was injured. It did not tell her to stop. The remaining had stopped their wild charge. They were circling now, studying her. She could see them reassessing, changing their tactics. They had expected an easy kill. They were beginning to understand that this human was something different. One of them spoke. Its voice was like metal scraping against metal. "You are one, we are many. You cannot win." "Maybe," said. She was breathing hard now, but her voice was steady. "But I can make sure none of you leave this room alive. Is that a trade you want to make?" They clicked at each other. Some kind of communication she could not understand. Then they attacked again, all at once. Stop thinking. She let her training take over, let her body move without conscious thought. Knife in the right hand, baton extended in the left. Block, strike, dodge, strike, every movement flowing into the next. She used the furniture as weapons. She threw a heavy chair at one, knocking it off balance, then crushed its skull with her baton. She kicked over a table to create a barrier, forcing them to come at her one at a time instead of all together. She used themselves as weapons. When one fell, she picked up its severed claw and used it to slash at the others. When another got too close, she grabbed its arm and redirected its strike into its partner. The watching from the edges of the room had never seen anything like this. Their species had evolved without predators. They had no instinct for violence, no understanding of combat. To them, what was doing looked like madness, like a dance of death that they could not comprehend. But it was not madness. It was skill. It was training. It was the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years of human warfare, passed down through generations of soldiers, distilled into the movements of one small woman fighting for her life. A got through her defense. Its claw stabbed into her left hand, pinning it to the ground. Screamed but did not stop. She released the baton, grabbed this head with her bleeding hand, and smashed it into the floor again and again until it stopped moving. Another slashed her across the back. She spun, too slow to dodge, and caught the blow on her arm. More pain, more blood. She answered with a knife to the throat that nearly took the creature's head off. The battle became a blur. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the next attack, the next defense, the next killing blow. Silver blood mixed with red on the crystal floor. Bodies piled around her. At some point, her knife broke. The blade snapped off inside a carapace. She used the broken handle to stab another one in the eye. When that did not work anymore, she used her fists, her elbows, her teeth. They had been right. She could not win. There were too many of them, and she was only human. But humans did not need to win. They only needed to survive long enough for the enemy to decide the price was too high. When the last fell, could barely stand. Her body was covered in wounds. Her left hand was useless, the bones probably broken. She had lost so much blood that the world was starting to go gray at the edges. But she was still standing. Around her lay 17 dead. 17 of the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy, killed by one human woman with a pistol, 2 knives, and the refusal to give up. She turned toward the throne. The queen was still there, huddled behind the crystal chair, staring with wide silver eyes. Her face was splattered with blood, silver and red. "It's clear," managed to say. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "Stay down until reinforcements." Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the bloody floor, her vision fading. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the queen running toward her, crying out in a language she could not understand. Then there was nothing. She woke briefly when the doors finally opened. She heard shouting, boots on crystal, the hum of medical equipment. Someone was carrying her. Someone was pressing something against her wounds. She heard Commander's voice, shaking with disbelief. How is this possible? 1 human against 17. And she heard the queen's voice, cold and sharp as broken glass. Get away from her. You do not deserve to touch her. Smiled or tried to. Then the darkness came again and she let it take her. She had done her job. She had protected the queen. Whatever happened next, that was all that mattered. In the stories that would be told later, they would call this the Night of Silver Blood. They would say that a monster in human form had saved the queen. They would argue about whether it was a hero or a demon, whether humans should be feared or... But the truth was simpler than any story. Park was a soldier. She had been given a duty, and she had not abandoned it even when everyone else did. That was not monstrous. That was not divine. That was just human. Woke in the Royal Medical Bay. She did not know how much time had passed. Days, maybe. The room was white and clean and filled with soft light. Medical machines hummed quietly around her bed, monitoring her heartbeat, her breathing, her brain activity. Her body was wrapped in regenerative silk, a healing technology that could repair damaged tissue in hours. She was alive. That surprised her. She tried to move and found that she could not. Her body was too weak, too broken. Every muscle ached, every breath hurt, but she was alive. You should not try to move yet. Turned her head slowly. Queen sat in a chair beside her bed. She was still wearing her ceremonial robes, now stained with dried blood. Silver and red, noticed. The queen had not changed her clothes since that night. How long? Asked. Her voice was rough, barely a whisper. 3 days. The doctors were not sure you would survive. You had lost too much blood. Your organs were failing. They had to rebuild your left hand almost completely. The queen paused. They said they had never seen anyone survive wounds like yours. Looked at her bandaged hand. She could feel it now, a dull throbbing pain that reminded her it was still attached. What happened? After you collapsed, smiled sadly. Reinforcements arrived. The forces throughout the palace were killed or captured. Lord tried to escape, but he was caught at the spaceport. He is being held for trial. And the guards, the elite guard. The queen's face went cold. Commander has been arrested for dereliction of duty. The guards who abandoned the throne room have all resigned in disgrace. They will never serve the empire again. Closed her eyes. She did not feel satisfied by this news. She did not feel anything except tired. The people are calling it the greatest betrayal in history, continued. For 10,000 years, the elite guard has protected our rulers. They were supposed to be the best of us. And when the moment came, they ran away and left their queen to die. They were afraid. Yes, they were afraid. The queen leaned forward. But you were afraid too, were you not? When you saw 17 assassins surrounding you, when you knew you could not win, you were afraid. Thought about it. Yes, I was afraid. But you did not run. No. Why? It was a simple question. Had been asked it many times during her military training. Why do soldiers stay when others run? Why do they fight when the odds are hopeless? Why do they die for people they barely know? She had never been able to answer it properly. The words always felt too small for the truth. Because someone had to, she said finally. Because you needed protection, because running was not an option I could accept. The Queen nodded slowly. My analysts have been studying what happened that night. They say that what you did should have been impossible. A single assassin has killed entire security teams. You killed 17 of them alone. I got lucky. No, his voice was firm. Luck does not explain it. Skill does not explain it completely either. My analysts are. They understand mathematics and probability and physical capability. What they do not understand is you. She stood and walked to the window. The crystal gardens were visible below, beautiful and peaceful, as if the night of silver blood had never happened. They do not understand how a creature can keep fighting when its body is failing. They do not understand how someone can ignore pain and fear and the certainty of death. They do not understand how you did what you did. She turned back to face, but I think I understand. What do you understand, Your Majesty? The Queen walked back to the bed and sat down. She reached out and placed her hand over his bandaged one. I understand that my people were wrong about humans. We thought you were primitive because you solve problems with violence. We thought you were dangerous because you are always ready for war. We looked at your history and saw only bloodshed, only suffering, only death. Her silver eyes met. We did not see what the bloodshed was for. We did not see that humans do not fight because they love violence. They fight because they love something else more, their families, their friends, their duty, their honor. She squeezed his hand gently. You did not stay because you wanted to kill. You stayed because you could not accept abandoning someone who needed you. That is not primitive. That is beautiful. Felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as emotion, pushing through the exhaustion and pain. I was just doing my job, she said quietly. No, the Queen shook her head. That is what my guards said. They were just following orders. They were just doing their job. Their job told them to run, so they ran. She paused. Your job told you to run too. The same protocols, the same orders, but you chose differently. Did not have an answer for that. The Queen stood again. Her expression had changed. She looked like a ruler now, someone making a decision that would shape the future. I am creating a new position in my court, she said. Not a cultural, not a ceremonial guard. A shield bearer, my personal protector, answerable only to me, with authority over all security matters in the palace and the power to override any military commander. Blinked, Your Majesty. The shield bearer will be responsible for protecting not just my life, but my empire. She will train new guards. She will review security protocols. She will ensure that what happened on the night of silver blood never happens again. Your people will not accept a human in that role. My people watched their guards abandon their queen while a human stood alone against death. His voice was hard. They will accept whatever I tell them to accept. And I will tell them this, when the darkness comes, when all logic says to run, when every reasonable voice says there is no hope, you want a human beside you. She looked down at with something like affection. Because humans do not calculate the odds, they do not weigh the costs and benefits, they do not choose the rational path when the rational path leads to betrayal. She paused. Humans stand their ground, humans protect what they love. Humans stay. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She blamed the medication. I am honored, Your Majesty, but I am just one person. I cannot change how the galaxy sees humanity. The Queen smiled. You already have. The story of what you did is spreading across the 17 star systems. Every species in the Empire is hearing about the human who killed 17 to protect an alien queen. They are asking questions they never asked before. They are wondering what else they were wrong about. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. 3 years ago, humans were considered primitive animals by my people. Curiosities, jokes. Today, my council is discussing a military alliance between our empire and Earth. the first true alliance between humanity and an alien civilization. Stared at her because of me. Because of what you showed us, not just your fighting ability, but your loyalty, your refusal to abandon your duty even when everyone else did. The Queen paused at the door. The galaxy is beginning to learn what Earth has always known, Park. What is that? The Queen's smile was warm now, almost gentle. That humans are not the strongest species, not the most advanced. But when everyone else leaves, when the logical choice is to run, when there is no hope and no reward for staying, humans stay anyway. She opened the door. And that makes all the difference. She left, lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. She was still the same person she had always been, a soldier from a small country on a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. She had not set out to change anything. She had just done what she was trained to do. But maybe that was the point. Maybe humanity's greatest strength was not any special ability or technology. Maybe it was simply this, the willingness to stand when others would not, the refusal to abandon those who needed help, the stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence on doing the right thing even when the right thing was impossible. Closed her eyes and smiled. She was proud to be human. And she was ready to show the galaxy what that meant.